Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. Today, we're looking back at photographs from the early 1900s, when there was no Photoshop, no special effects, only a camera and whatever truth it captured. Do you think these eerie details are just photographic errors? Or something that stood beside them more than a century ago? Watch closely and decide for yourself. The third face in the parlor. United States, early 1900s, a Saturday in late autumn, the kind where the light feels thin. Found the Carter twins in their mother's parlor, stiff in borrowed suits for a photograph no one particularly wanted. The taxidermied buck, shot by their uncle long before they were born, was meant to lend some pride to the family portrait. Only later, when Mrs. Carter held the finished print beneath the lamp, did she notice the small, pale face peering between the boys, as if crouched behind the mounted deer. She asked which cousin had been visiting that day. Both boys insisted no one else had been in the room. The longer she looked, the more the little face seemed to tilt, almost politely, toward her. By spring, the deer's glass eyes had gone cloudy, and the parlor door no longer closed all the way. The whisper beneath her collar. United States, late 1800s. Lydia Hartwell sat for her portrait on an ordinary gray Tuesday, the kind of day when the house felt too still. The photographer adjusted her lace collar again and again, unaware of the faint tapping behind the backdrop. When the plate was developed, a small, unfamiliar face hovered beneath Lydia's throat, as if peering through the cracked emulsion. Its features resembled Nora Fielding, a local girl who drowned years earlier in a flooded mill race. Nora was said to cling to women who resembled her mother, brushing their necks with cold, seeking comfort she never had in life. Lydia admitted she'd felt that breath, light as a moth. Afterwards, she wore high collars even at home, as though shielding her pulse. By winter, the portrait was turned to face the wall, and the tapping stopped. The widow's last vigil. United States, early 1900s. They said Elias Turner kept the parlor unnaturally warm the morning his wife, Marion, was laid out for her post-mortem photograph. He stood beside her with the rigid patience of a man who had practiced this moment in his mind. Straight collar, steady gaze, no trembling hands. The photographer later swore the room was empty, but for the two of them. Yet when the plate was developed, a faint, pale figure hovered near the sunlit curtains, a woman-shaped blur, tilted as if listening. Neighbors whispered it resembled Clara Moss, the midwife who died in the Turner house a decade earlier after a fevered night tending Marion. Clara was known in life for refusing to leave a patient's side. Elias claimed he felt a shift in the air, a soft rustling behind him. Hours later, the curtains still swayed, though every window was shut. The third reflection in the parlor mirror. United States, early 1900s. Nora Finch and her cousin Lillian liked to practice self-portraits in the parlor, proud of the new box cameras they'd saved for all winter. The mirror made the room look grander, its gilt edges catching every bit of the late morning light. They stood close, steadying their gloves on the little table so the exposure wouldn't blur. But when the photograph developed, something else stood behind them. A faint, slouched figure, its outline darker than any shadow the window could cast. Its shape resembled Mr. Alcott, the home's previous owner, who'd been found years earlier, collapsed near that very mirror after a bitter quarrel with his son. He was said to wander the hallways at dusk, pausing at reflective surfaces as though expecting someone to speak his name. Nora insisted she'd felt a chill at her back. Lillian quietly packed the mirror away the next day. The visitor in the doorway. United States, early 1900s. Mrs. Adeline Moore had risen early to arrange the flowers sent after her sister's passing, pausing only when the photographer arrived to document the parlor for the family. The room smelled of lilies and damp stems, the kind of sweetness that turns heavy if you breathe it too long. She tried to stand naturally, one hand resting on the table stacked with condolence books. But the developed photograph revealed a translucent figure drifting through the open doorway, tall, indistinct presence, neither fully male nor female, its posture oddly familiar. Some in the family swore it resembled Clara Jensen, the nurse who had tended Adeline's sister through her final illness and who herself had died the previous winter from exhaustion. Clara had been known to check her patients at night, moving too quietly to be heard. Adeline later admitted she felt someone pass behind her during the exposure. A faint stirring of air, as though a door had softly closed, though none had moved. The corridor that never stood empty. United States, early 1900s. The photograph was meant simply to document Mrs. Calder's sitting room after its fresh redecorating. The tiled hearth polished, the portraits dusted, the carved wood gleaming in the afternoon sun. She'd asked the photographer to capture the long corridor too, proud of how the rugs finally matched. It was a quiet house, the kind where footsteps traveled oddly far. Yet when the plate was developed, a faint, upright figure appeared near the right edge of the frame, blurred as though standing just long enough to be noticed. Some said it resembled Byron Keats, the traveling tutor who had boarded with the Calders years earlier and vanished during a winter storm after stepping out to fetch coal. His room remained untouched since, the door swollen shut every spring. Mrs. Calder later confessed she felt certain she'd heard the soft scrape of a chair behind her as the shutter clicked, though she'd been sure she was alone. The cook who never clocked out, United States, early 1900s. Mrs. Penfield snapped the photograph to prove her pantry wasn't as cluttered as her sisters claimed. Just a few tins, yesterday's bread, and the usual jumble of bottles. The noon light slanted in nicely, catching the copper pans and the clean white linens folded on the chair. She meant to mail the picture with a note insisting her housekeeping was perfectly sound. But in the developed print, a woman's faint face hovered near the counter. Features soft and watchful, as though waiting for instructions. Old neighbors recognized her outline at once. Alma Reeves, the Penfield's cook who died suddenly in the influenza wave, and was said to linger near the kitchen stove, murmuring reminders about rising dough and boiling water. Alma had always fretted over unfinished tasks. Mrs. Penfield later admitted she heard a spoon clatter behind her after the shutter clicked, though she hadn't set one out. The final watcher in the morning room. United States, early 1900s. The Kendricks insisted on a proper parlor viewing for Aunt Margaret, draping the room in black crepe and arranging lilies around her as though scent alone could soften grief. The photographer came quietly, stepping around vases and fallen petals, careful not to disturb the stillness that had settled over the house. He asked for only a moment's patience as he set the exposure. But the developed image revealed more than flowers and family devotion. Near the dark drapery, a faint figure rose in the shadows, its face blurred, yet unmistakably shaped like Reverend Hollis, the pastor who had died 2 months earlier after promising Margaret he'd return to pray with her one last time. Some said he'd been seen lingering around the churchyard, troubled by unfinished duties. The statue that listened back. United States, early 1900s. The garden behind the old Hendricks estate had long been left to itself. Wild daisies crowding the stone path, vines tugging at whatever they could claim. Still, the photographer thought the sun catching the mossy bust would make a pleasant study, the kind suitable for a Sunday supplement. He framed the shot quickly, bothered only by the sense that the shadows behind the ruins seemed to shift. Locals claimed that the statue depicted Eleanor Maddox, a young pianist who had drowned in the estate's reflecting pool nearly a century earlier. Her grieving parents commissioned the sculptor to capture her listening face, as though she might still hear them call her home. Over time, visitors swore the bust turned slightly, always toward whichever voice spoke nearest. As the photograph was taken, the air grew unusually still. Later, when the photographer looked at the print, he noticed the statue's gaze angled just a fraction higher than it had in life, toward him. The unwanted wedding guest, United States, mid-1900s. They said Lucy and Daniel barely noticed the photographer leaning in, urging them to hold still just a moment longer. The reception hall was warm, crowded, and full of the usual laughter that follows a first dance. Lucy, flushed from too little food and too much excitement, let her head fall gently against Daniel's shoulder. But when the photograph came back, something pale hovered behind them. Tall, indistinct, its skull-like face turned sharply toward the couple. Older relatives recognized the shape at once. Jonah Wilkes, Lucy's mother's first fiancé, who had died in a factory accident the year before she met Lucy's father. Jonah had been known for appearing in reflective surfaces whenever the family marked a major milestone, as though checking what life had continued without him. Lucy later admitted she felt a cold fingertip graze her veil as the shutter clicked. Just one, then nothing at all. The guest who refused to leave. United States, early 1900s. Mrs. Harriet Alden asked for the photograph chiefly to reassure her distant daughters that she was keeping house just fine, dusting the shelves, tending the ferns, and arranging her treasures in the same orderly way she always had. The parlor held its soft hush, the curtains gently stirring though the windows were latched. She folded her hands in her lap, patient and still. But when the print came back, a blurred seated figure occupied the floral armchair beside her. Its head bowed slightly, as though listening for permission to speak. Neighbors murmured the shape resembled Edwin Alden, Harriet's late husband, who had passed away in that very room during a mild spring rain. He'd been known for lingering near the bookshelf, rereading the same old favorite until his eyes closed mid-sentence. Harriet wouldn't say much, only that as the shutter clicked, she felt a familiar pressure in the room, like someone settling into a chair that had never truly been empty. The Boy in the Garden Path, United States. Early 1900s, Eleanor and Martin Pritchard had stepped into the overgrown garden behind their summer cabin simply to commemorate their first week away from the city. The light was mild, the flowers tall enough to brush their sleeves, and Martin insisted the small house behind them made the scene look pleasantly rustic. They held still while the shutter clicked, the air thick with the scent of late blooms. But when the photograph was developed, a faint figure appeared among the lower branches, small, slight, and watching them with a patience that felt older than any child's. Locals recognized him as Samuel Weatherby, a farm boy who had drowned decades earlier in the pond just beyond the bushes after wandering off during a family picnic. He was said to roam the property at dusk, drawn to visitors who resembled the siblings he'd left behind. Eleanor later recalled feeling something tug lightly at her skirt, though no branch lay close enough to reach her. The Girl by the Bridge, United States. Early 1900s, Margaret Lyle only meant to wade a little, just enough to cool her ankles after the long walk from town. Her cousin, eager to test a new camera, called for her to stand still while the light was still good. Margaret laughed, lifting her skirts, the water rippling softly around her shins. But once the photograph was developed, a pale, column-like figure rose from the lake behind her. Shapeless at first glance, yet disturbingly upright, as though straining toward the bridge. Locals whispered it looked like Emily Corcoran, a young woman who had drowned there one spring night after slipping from the stone railing during a sudden storm. Her spirit was said to drift near the surface, searching for a hand that might pull her back to shore. The Shape on the Stair, United States, early 1900s. The photograph was meant for insurance, proof that the old boarding house's back stairwell, battered by years of tenants, was still standing after a minor kitchen fire. The inspector snapped it quickly, stepping over sacks and loose boards, barely glancing at the warped railing or the soot-stained wall. The yard held its usual silence, broken only by a distant cart rattling past. But when the image was developed, a pale form clung to the lower steps, half the height of a person, blurred as though trembling. Longtime residents whispered that it looked like Henry Lowell, a delivery boy who had slipped on those very stairs during an icy December morning and died before help arrived. They said he'd been seen since then, hovering near the banister as if waiting to finish his route. The Bride Who Stayed Behind, United States. early 1900s, the portrait was discovered in the attic of the Hollinger house. Its glass cracked and its frame furred with dust. Whoever the young woman was, she had posed with the stillness expected of a bride. Hands folded neatly over a bouquet that time had nearly erased. Her veil, once white, now clung to the image in a faint, uneven haze. But beneath the damage, locals recognized the face as Lillian Marrow, a bride who vanished on the morning of her wedding after stepping out for a short walk to calm her nerves. Her gown was later found near the orchard fence. The bouquet scattered, though no footprints led away. Some claimed she had returned to the house for years afterward, glimpsed in mirrors just before storms. In the photograph, her eyes seemed fixed on something far beyond the camera, watchful, patient, as if waiting for the moment she meant to finish. The one who rose between them. United States, early 1900s. The church had been prepared with solemn care. 3 polished coffins arranged before the carved altar. Candles set exactly as the priest instructed, white cloth laid with trembling hands. The photographer stepped softly, trying not to disturb the hush that follows shared grief. He raised his camera only once, certain the scene required no second attempt. But when the plate was developed, a blurred figure appeared rising from the central bier, its form pale and angled forward as though straining to stand. Parishioners whispered the shape resembled Anna Wexler, the youngest of the 3 siblings being mourned, the one who had tended the others until illness claimed her last. She was known in life for rousing herself at the faintest sound, unwilling to rest until everyone else slept. The priest later admitted he felt a small shift in the air during the photograph, as if someone had brushed past his robes, lightly but with unmistakable purpose. The woman on the water lilies. United States, early 1900s. Clara Whitcomb had insisted on the photograph. She wanted proof she'd managed to stand on the giant lily pads at the botanical gardens without so much as dampening her hem. The morning was cool, the air threaded with the smell of wet greenery, and the broad leaves held her weight better than expected. She glanced toward the camera with quiet pride, steadying herself as the shutter clicked. Only later did the developed image reveal a pale figure at the edge of the reeds. Tall, indistinct, leaning forward as though trying to see Clara more clearly. Garden staff whispered it resembled Lydia May, a gardener's daughter who had drowned years before while collecting specimens along the pond's edge. Lydia had been known for wandering the paths at dawn, careful not to crush even the smallest leaf. Clara later admitted she felt the water tremble beneath her at the moment of the exposure, a ripple too small to see yet strong enough to make her breath catch. The faces above the family. United States, early 1900s. The Carraways had gathered in their best clothes, determined to send a proper family portrait to the cousins out west. The photographer adjusted the backdrop, straightened collars, and reminded everyone to sit very still. It was the sort of quiet, dutiful moment families enact without thinking, hoping the picture will look more harmonious than life feels. But when the print returned, 3 faint faces hovered above their heads, soft, vapor-like, layered as though drifting forward from a great distance. Neighbors whispered the topmost resembled little Annie Carraway, who had died of scarlet fever the previous winter. Beneath her, 2 older forms matched the features of the parents' long-gone siblings. The Carraways had always spoken of them gently, as though they might walk in at any moment. Mrs. Carraway later said she felt a warm pressure at her shoulder during the exposure, like a small hand wishing to be included. The head on the side table. United States, early 1900s. Alfred Penmore had wanted a simple photograph to send his sister, proof that he was resting, eating well, and not working himself to death, as she often scolded. He lounged on the patterned couch, boots crossed, chin lifted with a hint of pride. The room smelled faintly of pine and old varnish, the walls crowded with framed portraits he rarely bothered to dust. But when the photograph was developed, a faint human face appeared on the side table beside him. Pale, watchful, hovering just above the stacked papers. Neighbors whispered it resembled Clara Penmore, Alfred's late wife, who had died suddenly the previous winter and was said to linger near his desk, unsettled by the letters he never finished sending. Clara had always been the one to mind his correspondence, sealing each envelope with careful hands. Alfred later admitted he felt a small, inexplicable draft on his cheek during the exposure, like someone leaning in to read over his shoulder. And that brings us to the end of these century-old photographs. A camera may capture only light, yet sometimes it seems to hold on to things no one expected to see. If any image gave you chills, let me know in the comments. Was it just a photographic flaw, or something else lingering in the frame? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next dive into seemingly ordinary photos with not-so-ordinary secrets. See you in the next one.